Welcome to the round table, everybody. We are happy that you're here with us. If you're here sharing your Friday lunchtime with us, we appreciate that. I have my friends from staff agency here with me, Karen and Stephen. Karen and Stephen are both managing directors for staff agency. And Karen is also our HR person and operations person, and Stephen is also senior recruiter, senior business development person, jack of all trades, master of all. He is extremely knowledgeable in the career field. For those of you that know, I am not a recruiter, even though I co-founded a recruiting company. That is not my wheelhouse. Building businesses and management leadership development, that is my wheelhouse. These are two of the leaders that I am joyfully developing and have been over the last several years and intend to develop them for a few more years. And so today, given that we're coming into the end of the year where people often think about, okay, what is my career? What do I want for myself for the new year? Do I want a new job? Do I want a promotion? How can I get noticed? If I was to go look for a new job, how do I even show up in all the chatter? How do I ensure that my resume might get looked at? Because a lot of companies are using an AI bot now to do that first screening of resumes. So it's like people are really, I feel like, struggling for how do you show up? How do you get noticed? Because oftentimes there'll be a job put out there and then there's hundreds of applicants. So it's like, how do you get yourself noticed on social media and in your resume? And then once you get to the interview process, how do you show up there? And then we're also going to talk about, if you are already in a company that you like, how could you show up differently so that you might get a promotion or get more attention than you're getting? So we'll start out by saying, Stephen, if you are looking for a job and you are wanting to retool your resume, what makes a good resume? What makes a bad resume? And kind of what are the distinguishing factors? Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly, whether you're not looking for a new job or changing your careers, like a resume is important to have, just so you can kind of keep track of your career accomplishments, where you've been, what you're doing now. And yeah, some of the biggest things when it comes to your resume, I think a lot of people think it needs to really include a lot of different things, and it doesn't need to be 10 pages. It certainly can be, depending on where you're at in your career and kind of like what your accomplishments are. But the first thing really to kind of like note and focus on is the formatting and the font. You don't need to have a bunch of a lot of people may think like, oh, if I use different fonts and different sizes and things like that you're maybe going to get more noticed. But usually if there's a lot of different fonts or pictures or things like that, from my experience, those are the resumes that get ignored or just kind of pushed in to the pile of not moving forward. So picking like a simple font with bolded, like highlighted sections. Mm-hmm. I like to, when I get resumes from like candidates and I'm looking, I certainly will offer feedback and guidance. And first of all, you need to have your name at the top. Like, people need to know who you are and kind of like who they're looking to. Certainly if you are in a field like accounting, where if you have a CPA, things like that, certifications, those are always important to kind of list those after your name. And then always having your LinkedIn profile, so where people can go to find you. And those are always at the top of your resume. And then usually how I like to format the resume from there, you want to have some sort of like professional summary that kind of like highlights your experience and like some of the key things that you've done or accomplished in your career in a specific field that you're in and want to continue in. Or maybe if you're looking to kind of like change gears and shift to a different industry, maybe some key points that could be relatable to the industry you're looking to get into or the job that you're applying for. But ultimately, this is a section where you're going to kind of draw in whoever's looking at your resume so they can see what you've done, how exciting it is, and it's going to be like, wow, I want to kind of look deeper at this resume and kind of find out more about this person and what they've done and accomplished and why we would want to speak to them.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. So
Yeah.
when you're saying to put, okay, your name and everything, and then your LinkedIn profile. So let's just go there for a second, since you happen to mention it as something that's very important. And what
Right.
some people may not know, if someone does a Google search on you, the very first thing that will come up usually is your LinkedIn profile on a random Google search of your name.
Correct. Yep.
So this makes your LinkedIn profile even more important. And if you are in the professional arena and you do not have a LinkedIn profile, we recommend that you go and get yourself one immediately. So, Stephen, on their LinkedIn profile, what are some important things to have there? Number one is a good picture, right? Because some people have
Yep.
a terrible headshot. They have themselves on a beach or with a drink in their hand,
with
and
a
that is like,
significant other. It's like,
right. It's like LinkedIn is not Facebook. It's not Instagram. LinkedIn is specifically for kind of the business world. So our recruiters do most of their working and searching on LinkedIn, as do most recruiters all over the place. So it's like, if you want to show up in the professional arena, not only should you have a LinkedIn profile, you want to make sure that that looks a particular way. So beyond a professional profile headshot, Stephen, what else is important, in your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to your resume, and I like to really recommend candidates tailor their resume or their LinkedIn profiles pretty similar to their resume. There's a number of situations where maybe you have like a part-time job or something else, like another job that maybe you only held for a couple of months, but it doesn't line up with your resume. Like, those are red flags to like hiring managers. If it's not the same as what you're sending out with your resume, you need to make sure keep it off, or if it's something relevant, it needs to be in both. And then like just making sure like your dates and everything line up accordingly. And then again, very similar, you kind of have at the top your headline. If you're searching for a certain position, you kind of want your headline to be what you do, not necessarily like your position, but you kind of want it to be a little bit about like what you're doing and like why someone would be interested in you. And then the same thing, you have like an executive or professional summary, kind of like highlighting why someone would want to talk to you, like your accomplishments and things like that. So I really kind of try and keep them pretty similar. Your LinkedIn profiles, similar to like what your resume would be.
Okay, so let's talk about faux pas with your LinkedIn profile, some of which we've seen. You do not want to put on your LinkedIn profile that you have a degree from a particular school when you do not have one. We have seen this several times. Not only is it easy to check by calling the school that you supposedly graduated from, it's easy for an HR department to check on that. If they run a background check on you, it is a component of the background check that can be ticked off. So the three of us have seen several people that have actually gotten a job and then lost said job because they did not tell the truth on their LinkedIn profile. So where maybe like on Facebook or Instagram, you can make your life look better than it really is, you don't want to do that on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a place where an HR department may go to verify the information that's on there. Things like certifications, things like degrees and the like. Karen, what have you seen in some people's LinkedIn profiles
I was just thinking
that you can't unsee?
Yeah, I remember I was interviewing someone for a customer service role over the summer, and they had said they were a team lead. And come to find out they were just a standard customer service agent, which is what I was hiring for. I was hiring for an agent, but their LinkedIn said team lead. Their resume said team lead. When I got on the phone with them, they were a customer service agent. They weren't actually leading a team. So that prevented me from moving forward with them. Because if you're going to, move that, what else are you going to do?
Right. If you don't tell the truth in one place, you're likely to do that again. Stephen, what else have you seen that's a no-no?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of building off of that, anything that you put on your LinkedIn profile or your resume, you need to be ready and prepared to answer questions about whatever you have on your resume, whether it's a certain task that you performed or something you did in your company or something that is related to your job. You want hiring managers, the people who are interviewing you, are highly likely to ask you about certain things that are on your resume. And if you can't explain what you did, how you did it, then it's a easy sign that you probably just copy and pasted it from like a job description or things like that. And then you're going to be less likely to move forward and actually, so like anything that's on your resume or your LinkedIn profile, be prepared to answer questions around it. And you definitely want to make sure it's experience that you have. If it's something that isn't necessarily that maybe you have some experience with, like you don't have to necessarily, people think that you need to list every single thing, but certainly if there's areas that maybe you don't have a ton of experience in, but you've been exposed to it or you want to learn, like those are opportunities that during an interview, you can kind of bring those things up. And then it also kind of shows like you're curious and you want to like learn about something else. And it doesn't, not everything has to be on your resume. Again, it's kind of more, or your LinkedIn, it's more highlights of your career accomplishments, what you've done, kind of like the basics. But just like when we're interviewing candidates or like things like that, like there's more beyond the resume, there's more beyond the job description. And those are things that during the interview, when someone asks you like, oh, well, is there anything else you would like us to know about you? Or is there anything else you would like to know about the company? Like those are things where you can have questions ready to ask about that. If there's something that you saw on a job description for a job you're applying for, and you maybe kind of have some experience with it and you put it on your resume, but then you were asked about it and you couldn't explain it, that doesn't look good. But if you leave it off and you saw that was on there, you can bring that up, be like, well, I saw in this job description or for this role, there was this aspect. I have been exposed to that with my current role, but it's nothing that I've had hands-on experience with, but that's something that I would be very interested in learning about and gaining more experience. And then to those hiring managers, it's showing that you're like driven, determined, you want to learn, you want to grow. And typically those are things that companies are looking for in the individuals are looking to hire.
Okay. Tell me, any truth to the fact that the one-page resume does something magical that a longer resume doesn't do?
I think it can go both ways. Certainly, if you can fit the relevant information that you would need someone to know about you in one page, that's great. It's less to look through. But I mean, certainly if there's relevant experience, and again, someone who's been in the workforce for 10 years, as opposed to someone who's been in the workforce for 1 or 2, there's more things that you've done. And if you've moved up, you've taken on additional responsibility, kind of like having a 2-page resume that shows your career progression and that you've advanced. Those are things that are important and kind of stand out to hiring managers as well.
Okay. And what about the old school of thought that like if you are less than a year at a job, leave it off? Like if it should, like in other words, if you bounced around a lot, is that still like, is it still a good idea to stay at a job for at least a year because that looks better when you're looking for another job? Or just like what's the real truth about that whole thing?
With that, I mean, it kind of can depend, but usually kind of like the recommendation is if you haven't been at a job for more than 2 months, then you don't typically have to list it on your resume. Anything longer than that, there's going to be a pretty big gap and you're going to be asked about it anyways. So
Okay.
it's probably better just to put it on your resume. And I know obviously with like COVID and everything, and just companies going through like downturns, like laying people off, like there has been more people in the workforce that have changed jobs a lot more frequently. And even just in general, you don't see a lot of individuals who stay at companies for 10, 15, 20 years. It's just a lot more rare. But I think like the industry average is around like 2 to 3 years that
Mhm.
people stay before they move on. And obviously, if you get into a job and you're completely miserable and unhappy, and you can just kind of bring up examples and like explain that, I'm not going to hold that against somebody, because if you're completely miserable, you're probably not producing good work, and you're not benefiting yourself, and you're not benefiting the company. But the longer you can stay at a job, the better it is. I mean, it shows you're vested, you're dedicating time to actually like learn and make something work and figure it out. So, I mean, if you can stay for at least a year, it's much better. But again, you don't want to have a bunch of different jobs and kind of like move around too, because stability is definitely important to companies if they're investing time, resources, money into software, training, everything like that. Like that's a big investment.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Karen, what are the do's and don't do's when you're interviewing? Karen does a ton of interviews for one of our clients, and so she is like the interviewing queen. So
I don't even know where to start.
Well, tell us the top red flags. Let's start there. Number one, don't
Okay.
take your interview in the bathroom if it's a Zoom interview,
Or a
because
car,
we have
or in a
definitely had
tent.
that.
Or shirtless. Don't, it's just a video interview is going to the same as in person. Like what us three are wearing is traditionally what you would wear on a video interview. I would show up earlier than your interviewer. So a 5-minute, sometimes you can, or get into the waiting room if it's a Zoom before. I think that going like what Steven's saying is what your resume is, what you're going to speak to. If you're going off kind of the timeline of your resume, it is a huge red flag. And that's typically what you're going to be asked, and just kind of the basics.
And this is a question to either one of you. Someone that's being interviewed, what's going to make a person stand out to the interviewer or the hiring manager? Like, what are some things that people could do that kind of ensures that, just because when anyone applies for a job these days, potentially there are hundreds of other people applying for that job. So we kind of talked about what your resume could have so that you might even get noticed. So now let's just say you get noticed and you've gotten an interview. Like, what is something that you can do on the interview that shows the person that's interviewing you that, that sets you apart, right? One of the things I would imagine is doing research on the company that's interviewing you so that you have some background of obviousness, right, to the people that are speaking to you. What else? This is a question for either of you, both of you, whatever.
I think be authentic. I think authenticity goes a lot further than we imagine. It's very easy to sense someone that's a bit plasticky. Another thing that I really look for is someone who can address the elephants in the room before I do. So if you did have a lapse, let's say you're a stay-at-home mom for the first couple of years, and that's the lapse in your resume, and just being able to address that and moving forward, I think goes a long way, and just having clear communication.
Give me an example. Give me an example of like authentic versus inauthentic, like somebody that give, like, how does that look on an interview? What does that show up like for you, because you're the interviewer. So
like if you got laid off, or one of the biggest questions an interviewer is going to ask is, why'd you leave? Or why are you looking to leave? And there's a big difference. You don't have to tell the whole story. You don't have to tell your personal side of it. But if you got let go from a job, it's much easier to just translate that versus a whole runaround story that doesn't really add up or make sense, because you don't want to say that you got let go. It's okay if you got let go.
Right.
Okay. So really just, people need to tell the truth versus tell the interviewer what they think the interviewer wants to hear, because that just shows up differently. Steven, what else can people do since you interview so many candidates, what makes a candidate stand out to you that,
I think really, I mean, a lot of it kind of goes back to basics as well. Like, obviously, like showing up, play the part. Like, usually they kind of say dress for the job that you want, not the job you have. So like looking professional. Kara mentioned a good point, like showing up early. One thing you don't want to do though is like show up a half an hour early to like an interview or a Zoom interview, like, because a lot of times like the links can be like shared and they could see you trying to like log in a half an hour. Like you don't need to be that early, but you do want to make sure you allow enough time to kind of like arrive to the interviews and things like that. But definitely kind of like it can be tough in video interviews, especially if there's multiple people, but trying to do your best to like maintain eye contact and like look at the person who like asked you the question and like acknowledging that. Certainly like saying like thank you at the end of the interview, and even just going back to sending out like a thank you note, like thanking everyone for their time in the interview. So kind of just like those old school practices that I think a lot of people move away from.
Yeah.
Those are great things. And then I was trying to think, I kind of blanked on it, but I think when it comes to like being authentic, like you talk to a lot of people and they talk about like, oh, well, I'm looking to leave because I have no room for growth. And I feel like that's a very common answer that we get from a lot of like candidates, but it needs to be a little bit more specific, especially if you're interviewing not just with a recruiter, but with a hiring manager for a company. Like, what does growth mean to you? What opportunities have you not experienced at your current company that make you feel there isn't room for you to grow there? Is it you want to maybe shift gears into like a different department within the organization? But also too, coming back, have you asked your manager, like, are there opportunities for me to take on additional responsibility? This is something I have interest in. Are there resources that you can direct me to where I can kind of start learning about this? Because this is kind of, I'm starting to see that I have more personal interest in this, and I put in time here at this company. I would rather stay here than going elsewhere to look for another job. But have you asked those questions and really kind of looked at what does growth mean to you? What are the things you're interested in? What do you want to accomplish? As opposed to just like, oh, I feel like I don't have growth potential. But those are probably like, that's one of the biggest things that I see, and kind of always try and dig deeper when I'm speaking to candidates about potential opportunities, because if I don't understand that, it's tough for me to even determine if this is a role that we would want to have them move forward with and start interviewing for. Because if their idea of growth is one thing and this company or opportunity doesn't provide that, we're wasting our time kind of presenting and submitting someone in that situation.
Right. And that kind of leads us into our last little question here, which is like, if you are, like you said, if you're in a company, you've already invested time in that company and you're just not happy like where you are, or you want to grow, or you want to get promoted or get a raise or whatever, like what are some things you can do to show up as a person that adds value, to the company? And for me as a CEO, I can say that if someone in our company says, like you were just saying, Stephen, what else can I learn? What opportunity is there for me to learn a new skill? Or can I take this, certificate class because I see that you guys have a business development department and I'd really like to get into sales, even though I'm a recruiter. Like, how would I go about that? Like, in all honesty, we don't have a whole lot of people that ever come, begging us for an opportunity to, learn more or do more, truthfully. And I wish we saw more of that, because one of the things that we do offer at Staff Agency is the opportunity for people to have, personal growth, and a personal growth budget every year. And we don't really, honestly, we don't have a lot of people, that utilize that unless we kind of mention it to them. So what else do you think, Karen, what else can people do, since you're our HR aficionado? What else
Yeah,
can
and I
people do?
think I learned in my early, I've been almost 15 years in the corporate world. So in the first 5 years, I never really spoke up, and I thought people could read my mind. Like if I was helping training someone and I didn't, that's always my growth. People can't read your mind. What a shocker. I remember I would like help newcomers come in and train them, and it wasn't my job, but I loved doing that. And then when there was a promotion at the time of like, overseeing a team, I didn't get it. Well, I never said that I wanted it. Right. So that's like,
imagine.
Number one is express, but
Speak up.
a lot of the times it still happens. I see it all the time with especially newer entry levels. They don't speak up and saying what they want. They just kind of assume the company knows. And that's where I think a lot of turnover happens as well. So that's a big one, is just say what you want. If you don't have one-on-one meetings or you don't have check-ins, request them. You know,
That's
companies
a great
love
one.
to see someone proactive. Smaller companies won't always have check-ins, but if you proactively request that, it goes a long way.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, and to Karen's point, like chasing feedback, right? Like, you know, what can I do better? Like, okay, this was my production for this week. Like, it's not what I wished it was. Like, how can I do better? What else can I do? How can I, you know, get more sales, or how can I close more deals, or how can I, whatever your job is, how can I make more widgets, or, you know, if you really want to learn, there's always an opportunity to learn, I feel like. And then to Stephen's point, if you're trying to learn and you're telling people you want to learn and nobody's helping you, or there's no avenue for learning, then maybe you're just in the wrong spot, you know? Stephen, anything else you would add to, you know, what people could do to get noticed, or try to elevate themselves at their current company?
Yeah, I think really, I mean, Karen brought up probably like the greatest point, is just to really ask questions, have conversations with your direct manager, because if it's not known or spoken about, like, how is anyone going to be able, like, again, yeah, you can't, we're not mind readers. But another thing too, like, depending on what like the company structure is and kind of like what growth plans that are laid out are, a lot of times, like, if you're in a position and you want to get promoted, it's a great thing to start doing things that the role above you is doing, whether it doesn't have to be directly at the company, but if there's things you can take a course, like a free online class or something like that, or even pay for a class that would give you that, at least starting to get that experience for what the next level role would
That's a great idea.
Those are great things, because if you're able to kind of like show, like, hey, I've done some personal projects here, this is what I've been doing on my own time. I mean, that also shows a company that, like, you're dedicated, you're willing to put in time outside of work hours to learn new skills and level yourself up. That's also enticing, and things that you can kind of bring up. If you're kind of like hoping to get a promotion or things like that too, like, again, talking to your manager and understanding, like, what do I need to be doing and what do I need to be focusing on to progress and get to that next level, and then having those conversations continually, so that way you can track your progress around where you're at and towards that. And then during those meetings, having the evidence of like what you've been doing, be like, hey, I've been working on this is what my results have been, here's what I've been struggling with, maybe is there anything you see that I need to be like doing differently? And again, just kind of being vested in having those open conversations and bringing things up are really ways that are going to stand out, because then it shows that you're dedicated and willing to learn and put in the time and effort to get to that next level.
Perfect. All right. Well, we love to keep the time around here, because we realize some of you are watching on your lunch hour. We also realize that this is in the middle of the day. It just happens to be when we can do it. And we realize that the show will get watched later on, or on YouTube, or listened to on Spotify. But we're committed to showing up anyway and putting out good content that hopefully is useful to you. So you can visit us at staffagency.com. Where you can find lots of good information about all kinds of things. It's basically a plethora of information, articles, all kinds of good advice on there, staffagency.com. And you can visit the tagline that's scrolling at the bottom here, roundtableshows.com. Will show you everywhere that you can get the show. So it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, and then of course it's running off my Facebook page live on, I almost said on Saturdays, so that's the Coffee Chat Show. It's running on Friday afternoons. So we will be here next Friday, and we're going to talk about imposter syndrome, which is, I don't know, apparently a big deal for a lot of people. So we're going to grab a couple of coaches that we know and have them join us. And we're going to talk about what that is and how you can overcome that, and what to do to mitigate yourself through and past that, because truly that's just a worthiness issue and not believing in yourself. So we're going to kind of crack into that. And so hopefully that will help you as well. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Stephen and Karen. And we
Thank
will see you
you.
guys next Friday afternoon. And Karen and I will see you tomorrow morning for the coffee chat show. Oh, look at that.
Ooh.
Exactly 30 minutes.
Awesome.
Okay. We'll see you soon.
See you, everybody.